Welcome back to ABA Chapter Chat. Today, we're diving into something that's like super important for what we do, but can sometimes feel a little bit, I don't know, intimidating. Measurement in applied behavior analysis.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Measurement can be one of those things that, people have pretty strong feelings about. But I think when we, really break it down, it's all about seeing those small wins. The ones that, we might miss if we weren't really paying attention.
You're so right. It's like having this, magnifying glass for progress,
Right.
helping us see those tiny little steps forward that end up making huge changes for our clients.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting, right?
Yeah. For this deep dive, we've got some awesome source material that explores how measurement can actually make managing behavior change way more effective.
It's funny, we manage so many things in our lives with data. Businesses track their profits, athletes, they're always looking at their performance data. Heck, even our phones tell us how many steps we've taken. So it makes you think, why wouldn't we use data to manage human performance? Especially when we're talking about helping people achieve, goals that are really meaningful to them.
Yeah. It makes total sense when you put it like that. And our source material actually emphasizes that exact point. It says, and I'm quoting here, measurement allows you to see smaller changes in performance than you could see through casual observation.
I think that's what I love so much about ABA. It's all about being precise, making those small, tiny adjustments that lead to big results.
Exactly. Think about it. When we can actually see those small improvements, we can reinforce them more often. And that really speeds up how our clients learn. It's like we're giving them this constant stream of encouragement, showing them, hey, you're on the right track. Keep going. Even if it's just baby steps, it's super motivating. But I'm also curious about, what about the people who push back against measurement? I've had clients say things like, you can't measure what I do, or even, you don't trust me. Have you run into that kind of resistance?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of times it comes from, past experiences, like those times when measurement was linked to something negative, like, the dreaded performance reviews or even report cards. People start to think that measuring means being judged or even punished.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like there's this baggage that comes with the word measurement. So how do we change the conversation? How do we help clients see that measurement in ABA is actually, a tool for positive change?
I think one way is to really make it clear that in ABA, measurement is all about supporting progress. It's not about finding fault. We're looking for those tiny steps forward so we can celebrate them and build on them. It's about using data to empower our clients, not to control them or, criticize them.
I love that reframing, shifting from a gotcha kind of mindset to more of a let's figure out what's working mindset. And our source material lays out this really helpful framework for how we should think about measurement in ABA. It talks about 4 key categories we can focus on depending on, the behavior we're working with.
Right. Those categories are quality, quantity, timeliness, and cost. And, they might sound kind of familiar on their own, but the key is to really understand how they apply specifically.
Okay. Ready to take notes. Let's break down each one of those categories.
All right. So the first one up is quality. And this is all about how well a behavior is performed, not just did it happen or not? For example, if we're teaching a kid to write their name, the quality would be about how neat their handwriting is, or if all the letters are accurate. It's not just about, can they scribble something on the page?
Gotcha. So it's not just a yes or no, but about really looking at the finer details of how the behavior's done.
Exactly. Then we've got quantity, which is really about, how often a behavior happens. And this is where counting's our best friend. How many times did a client use their communication device to ask for something? How many math problems did they solve correctly? Quantity helps us track trends and see if a behavior is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same.
Okay, so quantity feels pretty straightforward. What about timeliness?
Timeliness is all about the when. When does a behavior happen? Or how long does it take to finish something? Think about things like how long it takes a client to answer when you ask them something, or how quickly they can switch between activities. This can be super important when we're working on things like, reducing tantrums or helping them get tasks done faster.
So if we're teaching a child to get ready for bed on their own, Timeliness might be about how long it takes them to put on their PJs and brush their teeth.
Precisely. And then there's cost. This one might seem a little less obvious when we're talking about behavior change, but it's relevant when we think about the resources or effort it takes for a behavior to happen. For example, imagine we're teaching a client a new communication skill. The cost might be how much effort they have to put into using their device instead of, falling back on a problem behavior.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like thinking about a cost-benefit kind of thing for the client. Like, is this new behavior worth the effort?
You got it. And by considering all four of those categories, the quality, quantity, timeliness, and cost, we get a much more complete picture of, the behaviors we're working with.
This is super helpful. It's like we're building this multi-dimensional view of behavior, not just looking at it in a one-dimensional way.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking, with all these different categories, how do we choose which ones are like the most important to measure for a specific client or behavior? It feels like it get pretty overwhelming trying to measure everything.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. That's where careful planning and, figuring out what to prioritize comes in. And our source material gives us some awesome guiding questions to ask ourselves. First, if performance varies on this measure, does it matter? Like, is this something that's really important to track? That's the first thing to ask yourself. Like, okay, let's say we're working with a client and they're learning to wash their hands independently, right? Does it really matter how fast they can do it, when they're first learning? The goal at first is really just making sure they do all the steps correctly.
Right, yeah. The speed can come later once they've got the basic routine down.
Exactly. The second question to ask is, does actual performance usually vary on this measure? Like, if a behavior is already pretty consistent, we probably don't need to be tracking it super closely, right?
So like if a client always greets their therapist with a smile, we don't need to start counting smiles. We already know it's a consistent behavior.
You got it. And the last question is the variation big enough that we actually need to do something about it? Sometimes we see these small, little changes in a behavior that are just normal variations. We don't want to jump to conclusions about every tiny change.
So let's say a client usually finishes 10 tasks during a session, but one day they only do 8. That's probably not a huge deal, right? But if it becomes a pattern, then we might want to look a little closer and see what's going on.
Exactly. By asking ourselves these questions, we can be really smart about how we measure and make sure we're focusing on the data that's actually important. You know what I mean?
This is so helpful. It's like we're creating a roadmap for measurement, helping us figure out what to track and why. But okay, so once we know what we're measuring, the next question is how. Our source material talks about 2 main ways to do it: counting and judging. And it actually says, and I quote, "Counting is the preferred method of measuring because practically everybody can do it."
Counting is definitely a go-to in ABA because it's objective, it's straightforward, it's all about the numbers.
Yeah.
How many times did something happen? How long did it last? How many things got done?
It's like keeping score in a game, right? It's clear, easy to understand, there's no guesswork.
Exactly. And because it's so objective, it's easier to make sure that everyone who's watching and recording the behavior is doing it the same way, which is really important for getting reliable data.
So counting is great for those behaviors that are easy to count, like how many times a child asks for help or the number of steps they do in a routine like getting dressed.
Right on. But what about those behaviors that are, a little more complicated? The ones that aren't so easy to just count. That's where judging comes in.
Okay. So judging is where we use our professional judgment to figure out what's going on with the behavior based on some specific things we're looking for. Our source material mentions things like social skills or how well someone can regulate their emotions, or even the quality of, something creative a client's working on.
Exactly. These are the behaviors that are more complex. They don't have a simple yes or no answer. Think about a child learning to share toys with other kids. We can't just count how many times they share, right? We also need to look at how willing they were to share, how they reacted when the other kid asked, and whether they had any problem behaviors while they were interacting.
So judging takes a little more interpretation from us. It's not just tallying up numbers.
Right. And that's why it's so important to have clear definitions for what we're looking for and criteria for each behavior. We want to make sure that everyone who's observing and judging the behavior is seeing it the same way. Our source material mentions some techniques we can use to add structure and consistency, like rating scales, behavior checklists, and point systems.
Those tools sound really helpful. Making sure we're all speaking the same language when we're talking about behavior. Can you give us some examples of how they're actually used in real-life ABA?
Sure. Let's start with behavior checklists. These are super versatile. You can use them to track all sorts of things. Imagine you're teaching a child how to brush their teeth, a multi-step routine, right? You could make a checklist that breaks down each step, like get the toothbrush, wet it, put on toothpaste, brush each part of your teeth, rinse, spit. Then, as the child completes each step, you check it off the list.
It's like a visual roadmap, both for the child and for the therapist. And it makes collecting data super easy.
Exactly. And you can adapt checklists for all sorts of goals, tracking social skills during playtime, the steps in a self-care routine, all kinds of things.
Okay, checklists are a winner for sure. What about those weighted checklists you mentioned? How are those different?
Weighted checklists are kind of like checklists, but on steroids, you know. They let us put more importance on certain behaviors or certain steps in a routine by giving them different weights. So let's say we're working with a client on communicating better, and we want them to use more words instead of just gestures. We could make a checklist that includes both, but we'd give the words more weight. That way, even if they use gestures sometimes, they can still earn more points for using words, because that's the skill we're really focused on.
I like that. It's like we're acknowledging that progress isn't always, a straight line up, and that even if a client doesn't do it perfectly every time, we can still recognize those steps in the right direction.
You got it. And then we have point systems, which are awesome for tracking progress on a bunch of goals at the same time. Imagine a client working on social skills, communication, and self-help skills all at once. We could set up a point system where they earn points for progress in each area. Then we can combine those points into one overall score to get a big picture view of how they're doing.
It's like creating a personalized scorecard for the client, showing their strengths and what they could work on.
Exactly. And these point systems can be super motivating, especially if we link those points to rewards or special privileges.
I love how these tools make measurement so real and engaging for the client, not just some abstract idea, but something they can actually understand and get involved in.
Absolutely. And speaking of tools that tie everything together, let's talk about the performance matrix. This is where it gets really interesting. It's kind of like the ultimate measurement tool for ABA.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more about it.
Think of the performance matrix as a supercharged point system. It combines both counting and judging measures into a single score that shows the client's overall performance. It's a way to capture those more nuanced behaviors that we might miss with simpler tools.
It's like we're weaving together all those different pieces of data to get a bigger picture of how the client's doing.
That's a great way to put it. And the best part about the performance matrix is that we can customize it. We can tailor it to each client's specific needs and goals.
Okay, I'm definitely ready to learn more about this. Tell us how we would actually make and use a performance matrix.
Well, the first thing is to figure out what our source material calls accountabilities. These are like the key areas where we want to see progress. And they can be anything that's important for the client's overall goals: communication, social skills, academics, self-care, even things like how they're doing at work or in relationships.
So it's like building a roadmap for their journey, and each accountability is a different place they're trying to reach.
You got it. And once we've got those key accountabilities, we need to break each one down into smaller, more specific things we can actually measure. These are called pinpoints in our source material. So if one of our accountabilities is communication, we might break it down into pinpoints like using words to ask for things, answering questions correctly, or starting conversations.
So we're zooming in on those specific actions that will help them reach that bigger goal.
Exactly. And then for each pinpoint, we choose the best way to measure it, either counting or judging, and we give each one a weight based on how important it is compared to the other pinpoints in that accountability.
So if using words to ask for things is really important for a certain client, we might give it more weight than starting conversations.
Right. And then as the client shows us they can do those pinpoints, they earn points based on the weight we assigned. All those points get added up to give us a total score for each accountability, which shows us how much progress they're making in that area.
Okay, now I'm starting to see how everything fits together. It's like a multi-level point system, where we're not just looking at each behavior by itself, but also how those behaviors add up to the client's big goals.
You got it. And seeing it all laid out in the performance matrix can be really helpful for both the client and the therapist. We can see progress over time, spot any patterns, and celebrate successes in a way that's clear and motivating for everyone.
This sounds incredibly powerful, but I can also see how it could feel a little overwhelming to set up, especially if you're a busy ABA professional who's already juggling a ton. Any tips for making it more manageable?
Oh, for sure. One of the best tips is just to start small. You don't need to measure everything at once. Maybe just pick one or two important accountabilities to focus on at first, and then you can add more as you get more comfortable with it.
That makes me feel better. It's like learning any new skill, right? You've got to break it down into smaller steps and gradually build your confidence.
Exactly. And another tip is to see what data you're already collecting. We don't always have to start from scratch. You might have helpful information in your session notes, client logs, or even data that teachers or parents have collected. By just organizing and looking at the information you already have, you can learn a lot without having to create whole new systems.
So before we even start building a performance matrix, it's worth checking what we're already doing and see if we can use those existing data points.
You got it. And don't be afraid to get creative with how you collect data, too. Get clients and their families involved. Look into using technology to make things easier and just find what works best for you and your clients. There's no one right way to do it.
This is so helpful. I'm feeling a lot more confident about using these measurement tools in my own practice. But before we move on from measurement, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier, using measurement to see how effective we are as therapists.
Oh, that's a really important point. It's easy to just get caught up in the day-to-day of therapy and think that what we're doing is working. But without data, we're really just guessing.
So measurement isn't just about tracking how the client is doing. It's about holding ourselves accountable too, making sure we're doing the best we can as therapists to give our clients the most effective help.
Exactly. By tracking our own performance, we can figure out what we might need to work on, change our strategies, and in the end, become better clinicians.
It's like that saying, what gets measured gets managed. If we aren't measuring how effective we are, how do we know if we're actually making a difference?
Right. And that's where those same principles we've been talking about, the quality, quantity, timeliness, and cost, can apply to our own work as therapists. We can use checklists to see how well we're following our own plans, point systems to see how we're progressing toward our own professional goals, and even performance matrices to get a big picture view of how effective we are in different areas of our practice.
This is so empowering. It's like we're taking all those tools and strategies we use to help our clients and using them to help ourselves grow as professionals.
Exactly. By really embracing measurement in all aspects of our work, we can create this environment where we're always getting better, not just for our clients, but for ourselves as well.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I'm feeling super pumped to actually put all these awesome ideas to work. But I know that, change can be a little scary sometimes. So how do we make this whole transition as painless as possible?
I think the first thing is to really embrace that change in mindset. The one we were talking about earlier, where we stop seeing measurement as this chore and start thinking of it as something that can actually make our work easier and more effective.
Yeah, it's like turning measurement into our friend, not our enemy. But even when we, want to make that change, where do we even start?
A good place to begin is to think about the clients you're working with right now. Are there any who would really benefit from a more structured way of measuring? Maybe someone who's working on a lot of different goals at once, or a client whose behavior is, tricky to keep track of.
Yeah.
Those could be good people to start with.
Makes sense. Start small, pick one client or behavior to focus on, and then go from there.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment a little, Try different tools, different methods, and see what works best for you and your clients. Maybe checklists are great for one client, but another client is way more motivated by a point system. It's about finding the right fit.
It's like building a custom toolkit for each client, using all those different measurement strategies we've been talking about.
You got it. And remember, you're not alone in this. Talk to other therapists, go to workshops, join online groups. There's so much knowledge and support out there.
Oh, that's such a good point. We're all in this together. There's no shame in, reaching out for help or bouncing ideas off each other. Collaboration is so important in ABA, and that definitely applies to measurement too.
Absolutely. And speaking of collaboration, don't forget to bring your clients and their families into the loop. Explain why you're collecting data, how you're going to use it, and give them ways to get involved in tracking their own progress.
Yeah, that's so important. When clients feel like they're part of the process, they're way more likely to be engaged and, invested in their own success.
Right. It's all about empowering them. Oh, by the way, have you ever used technology to help with your measurement stuff? It's crazy how much tech can make things easier and even make it more fun for the clients.
I've played around with a few apps for data collection, but I'm always down to learn about the newest, coolest tech tools. What are some of the ways technology is being used for measurement these days?
Well, one really exciting area is wearable tech. Like those smartwatches or fitness trackers, they can keep track of things like how active someone is, their sleep patterns, even things like heart rate. It's like a whole new level of data that can be really helpful, especially for clients who might not be able to tell us how they're feeling in words.
Whoa, that's so cool. It's like having a peek inside the client's world. And it helps us understand their behavior in a much deeper way.
Exactly. Another area that's like blowing up is virtual reality and augmented reality. Imagine making these immersive worlds where clients can practice skills in a safe and controlled space. Like a client who's working on social skills could practice with virtual people in a simulated social situation. And because these virtual places are so packed with data, we can track tons of things. Eye movements, body language, what they say. We get this like super complete picture of how they're doing.
That's amazing. It's like taking role-playing to a whole new level. And I bet it's super engaging and motivating for clients.
For sure. But, it's important to remember that tech is just a tool.
Mhm.
It should be used to help us do our jobs better, to build stronger relationships with our clients, not to replace those things.
Absolutely. We have to use technology in a way that's ethical and puts the client's needs first.
Exactly. In the end, whether we're using fancy gadgets or just plain old pen and paper, the reason we measure is always the same: to get to know our clients better, to celebrate the progress they make, and to help them be as successful as they can be.
That's such a great way to put it. It's all about empowering our clients and helping them reach their full potential. Measurement isn't about judging or criticizing. It's about understanding, support, and growth.
Could have said it better myself. It's about using data to show us the way to positive change.
This has been an amazing conversation. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on measurement in ABA. I'm so ready to start using these ideas in my own work.
It's been awesome exploring all of this with you. And remember, the learning never ends. Keep trying new things, keep talking to your colleagues, and keep using measurement to make a real difference for your clients.
That's right. Well, that's it for this episode of ABA Chapter Chat. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into measurement, and we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your experiences, anything you're wondering about on social media. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a positive impact.